Welcome to Hacking the Truth. I'm your host, James Trinkle Clements. For centuries, humanity has pondered the question of does Bigfoot exist? Sightings are reported all over the globe, but is this elusive creature fact or fiction? Like you, I want to know. So I started my search at the Bigfoot Expedition Experience in Blue Ridge, Georgia. As you enter, a sign reads, "You may enter a non-believer, but you will leave a believer. Will you?" Let's go, Hacking the Truth. I'm here with David Bakara, and David, we came to Expedition Bigfoot. I say we. Susan's with me today, and we found it so fascinating last year. And I said, I've got to find out who owns this, because number one, I'm a believer, but whoever put this together, I want to know where they got the information, where they got the artifacts, how they became interested. So I'll kind of turn that over to you, and if you'd just give us a background.
Sure. So I grew up in South Florida back in the 60s and 70s, and ever since I was growing up, I'd heard about Tales of the Skunk Ape on the TV, on newscasts, in the newspaper. I'd seen great documentaries produced in the early 70s. So as my young mind was strongly impressed upon the seriousness of these unusual apes being spotted in Florida. So it was never a laughing matter to me. And then I went to go see The Legend of Boggy Creek, probably the cult classic.
That is a classic.
Yep, and of course the tagline is a true story. And the more I learn about the movie, in fact, everything in that movie did happen, and more, much more. And so I was hooked after I saw that movie. And we moved up here about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. So we're right between Blue Ridge, Georgia, and Ellijay, Georgia, in a little town called Cherry Log. We're right on the main highway, 515. It's also Zell Miller Highway, but our mailing address is Blue Ridge, Georgia. So we're right on the main highway. And we noticed that I was back in the restaurant business, but I've been an investigator, part-time investigator with the Bigfoot Field Research Organization since 2010, but I've been reading and researching this since I was 12.
Wow.
And we just noticed there was a real lack of family entertainment up here, something that was suitable for grandma, grandpa, their kids, and their grandkids all come together. So we just thought about making a family attraction from all we knew about Bigfoot. Of course, all my friends are Bigfoot researchers or witnesses, so there was no shortage of artifacts. I had quite a few already, but not enough to fill a museum. So once I put the word out that I was opening up a museum, I got all kinds of calls and artifacts and foot casts and videos, and I got a lot of donations to the museums, because we do have lots of footprints here, but I try not to make up such a big deal about them, other than the Georgia footprint, which was authenticated by the FBI fingerprint expert, because there's so much more than just the footprints. So we have the world's largest collection on permanent display here, but there's so much more. We have hair samples and videos of gentlemen talking about their encounters with Bigfoots while they were hunting, and Yeti exhibits. So I knew that when you open up this place, my wife and I are huge Disney World and Universal Studio fans, and we appreciate the kind of effort it takes to capture kids' attention. And so we kind of mixed the theme park with the museum, because you can't just put a bunch of posters on the wall and think you're going to entertain kids. There has to be sound and movement, and more to stimulate the brain. So that's how we kind of mixed it all together. So
What are the hot spots? You mentioned Florida's number 3.
Yep. So the hotspots of Florida would be the Panhandle of Florida, anywhere around Tallahassee area, not in Tallahassee.
I go to Apalachicola a lot. I should start looking.
Yeah, there's plenty of sightings up there.
Okay.
I have a guy that comes here, actually. He knows where a family of them live near, just outside Apalachicola. And the TV crews try to get his information. I told him to keep his mouth shut. You don't need to drink it. They'll ruin it for you.
Oh, they will.
Oh, absolutely. Ocala area. Oh my God, there's so many great stories there. So if anybody was ever going to look for a big
National Forest, all
there's
through
no
there.
doubt. Yeah.
I used to camp there.
Yeah. Lots of great stories there. And Collier County, near the Everglades, I would say that those would be the top 3 places to. Yeah. So California and Washington are the two highest reported sightings. Then is Florida, Oregon, and then Ohio round up the top 5. And I think a lot of it's just too that the more people report them in a certain state, the more people feel free to report their sightings. So I think a lot of it has to do with human behavior. You know, nobody wants to be the first volunteer, but when somebody else raises their hand, or 2 or 3, then all of a sudden, okay, yeah, I'll go, I'll do it. So
Yeah.
I think that's got a lot to do with it. But in fact, they're in every state. Nebraska, I think, only has like 9 or 12 sightings. I'm sure they've been spotted more than that, but there's a certain swath in the central United States where there aren't too many sightings, where there isn't a lot of water, or it's not real mountainous. There's not so many sightings, but they're still sighted there, but just not as much.
What do you think, if you were going to say 1 or 2 things you have here is the most compelling evidence that Bigfoot exists?
To me, it's always still going to be witness interviews.
Okay.
And from the eyewitnesses, because you get to a certain age when you can tell when somebody's being dishonest or deceit, and you don't pick it up on an email or in a book. But when the person's standing in front of you, you can look them dead in the eyes. To me, that's one of the best. It is still the best lie detector, and that's why we have Mike Woolley in here. The recording of him talking about his encounter with 2 Bigfoots while he was hunting in Louisiana back in the mid '80s. So that's probably one of my favorite things, because people watch that and they can just tell that this guy knows no reason for him to be lying. So that's still one of my favorite ones. Probably the life-size display of the Ape Canyon incident also. You know, we hear the story about the 5 guys who were descended upon by a group of Sasquatches in 1924, but that's the biggest display we have here, is the inside of the cabin with the Bigfoots busting in. So I think that instills, and you can hear the sounds on the headphones of what it would be like to be inside the cabin when that was happening. Now, you have to keep in mind, people do send us recordings of strange things.
Yes.
That recorded, and a lot of times it could be an owl, sometimes, and panthers make terrible screaming sounds in the woods. Vixens, foxes, they make terrifying screeching sounds in the woods as well. But usually when you hear that, when you're a seasoned outdoorsman, you can tell it's coming from a small animal. Even if it's loud, you can tell it's coming from a small set of lungs. But these things, I've never heard them, but I've talked to people that have heard them make sounds in the woods, and they say it's so loud, it's so powerful, it vibrates your whole body. You know it's coming from a gigantic animal. So, and they don't all make the same sounds. Sometimes it's whooping, sometimes it's whistling, it's clicking, sounds like wood knock, sounds like 2 rocks getting clanked together. Sometimes it's a grunt. Sometimes it's a very deep, low guttural growl that vibrates your whole body. And then there's probably 7 or 8 different kinds of screams they make. So yeah, they have a way of making themselves known, and I think a lot of times they'll use that to get rid of you without having to show themselves to you. A lot of rocks being thrown, branches, acorns at you, they creep you out. They make you move, like if you're fishing and he wants to get in that area, they'll throw rocks in the water in front of you and make you move out, because they know how to get rid of you without actually showing themselves. They want to make you leave, but they don't want you to leave and come back with friends. They just want you to leave. So that's they use little things like that to make you move on, but you probably won't come back. So they're very much like humans in the fact that 95% of the humans you meet are not going to hurt you.
Yeah.
Some are very friendly, and just like these things, some have a real affection for us. They help us when we're lost. They save children in the woods. There's a lawyer in Ohio that actually came out after he retired from the bar that said a big female had rescued him when he was lost in the woods and actually brought him back to camp, and was so worried about him wandering off and put a big log on him to hold him. He was a little toddler, to hold him down until his parents come back to the campsite. But unfortunately, like humans, there are some bad elements in there, and you can just imagine what an 8-foot animal that's faster than they could run 35, 40, 45, 50 miles an hour, and it's like stealthing in the wood. You can imagine what kind of damage something just one of those could do, let alone 100 of them. Yeah. So we tend to want to make, is it good or bad? when in fact most of them, it's different shades of good and bad. But the large majority of these things really don't want anything to do with us, and most of them will just walk away. They actually get disgusted with themselves when they realize when a human has seen them. But I'd be a liar if I said that there's not a tiny percentage of them that do not like us.
Is there any estimates of how many, what the population could be? Is there any feeling about that?
So the bear biologists have come forward to say that they're anywhere between, to have a viable breeding population, a minimum of 3,500 up to 10,000 in North America.
Okay.
So how accurate that number is, I don't know, but it sounds like a pretty good number to me. So when you try to tell people that there's giant families of giants wandering the woods, who wants to think that? Especially hunters that feel at ease in the woods. Do they want to think that there's a 10-foot giant up there they can reach and snatch them right out of a tree stand if they so choose to? And it's too disturbing. It's too frightening. For every hunter that's come in here to tell me that there's no way these things are real, because I've been in the woods my whole life, I've met 2 guys that have told me that they've had one walk up under their stand, walk up to their stand, walk past them when they were hunting. So for every one that tells me that they can't be real, I've got 2 hunters that tell me that they are, because they've watched them.
I do remember when we were here last year, and I'm not sure if it was a video or a tape, but of the military, the helicopter had crashed and they went into the woods. I don't know exactly where it was. Where was that?
So that was just north of what is just north of so many towns here in Georgia. Not
was it in Georgia?
Oh, it's in Georgia. It's only about 40 miles from here, and there's a plaque up there from where the helicopter crashed, Dawsonville. So it's just north of Dawsonville. Yeah. And it's actually difficult to find. I've actually tried to find somebody to take me out there and show me the plaque where it happened. But the actual crash itself didn't have anything to do with Bigfoot. It's the smell of the burning bodies actually brought 3 Bigfoots in. So that story was submitted to the BFRO back in the mid-2000s. And since then, somebody came out and said, I've read that and it's not true. But then I've had 2 people come in here whose husbands, that live in Georgia, whose husbands were at the
crash site?
No, they weren't at the crash site. They were at the base when the guys came back to the crash site, and they were talking about it, and they were all told to shut up, stop talking about it. So that's why I included it, because in my mind, it has not been debunked. Not when 2 people come in here, 2 wives, and told me that their husbands were there, and they told them about it.
So basically, the helicopter crash, they sent in, I don't know, 3 or 4 individuals, military men, to go see if there were any survivors.
Right.
When they got there, they saw the Bigfoot family, I think, there at the crash site, going through. They had smelled the bodies, dragging some stuff off. I don't know if there were bodies or parts. Or
they were pulling the bodies out,
They were pulling the bodies out.
And they opened fire on them, and then they stayed up all night after the creatures had run into the forest in darkness. They had built the fire up really high and stayed up all night until the extraction team came in to remove the bodies the next day.
Wow.
I think they've always been here. I'm in contact with, and I follow a lot of research in Australia, and there's this continent that sheared off Asia, 250 million years ago.
Oh, I didn't know Australia.
Yeah, Australia, they have the Yowie there, and lots of great reports are there. And they've even though the continent is largely undeveloped, I think the oldest living skeletons ever found, I think they just found a couple 1 or 2 that were 50,000 years old, but most of them are only 2,000 years old. So mankind is relatively new to Australia. So, I mean, how did these things get there? How did these giant humans get there? Families of them. They've been spotted all over Australia. So the land bridge thing only gets you so far. So yeah, I don't know how they got here. I have my theories. So when the first Gigantopithecus, the teeth and some jaw fragments were discovered, had been discovered in caves in China, Vietnam, and I think Russia as well. And we've only got enough to put together a small portion of a jaw, and then a few hundred teeth, fossilized teeth. And when you look at the image that the scientists have put forth of Gigantopithecus, what you have is a giant ape. Because when they found the teeth, they said, well, this must be some sort of giant ape. So what you're looking at is a quadruped ape, but in fact, scientists have no idea what it looked like. So we already have the impression that these teeth belong to a giant ape, when it's just as likely that they belong to a giant, upright, 10-foot, hairy ape man. So, so it's possible that these things already exist in our fossil record, but for some reason, yeah, we're not supposed to know about them. It's interesting that every single Native American tribe had their own name for these creatures.
Yes.
It's hard to imagine that they were all had their own imaginary giant wild man in the woods. And when you go back to read the newspapers in the 1800s, early 1900s, there's just hundreds of newspaper reports of people spotting these things, taking cows and chickens. This is well before the 1950s, when the Jerry Crews discovered the first footprints, photographed him, and the name Bigfoot was coined by a newspaperman. Well, the reports of these things go way before that. In fact, these things were seen way back. I think the first Endangered Species Act was enacted back in 1960, but the National Forest Service, I don't think was actually, I'm trying to remember the date it was, but the sightings and the suppression of these things started way back before the Forest Service was ever established. So whatever the secret behind these things are predates our government and the Forest Service. So for whatever reason that we're not allowed to know about these, in my opinion, doesn't have a whole lot to do with the forest. The thing is something else. In reality, when people come in here and they tell me that they saw Bigfoot, but their father or mother don't believe them, or their wife doesn't believe them, it's really a microcosm of the human mind. Is that when you introduce very disturbing information to somebody, and it conflicts with their belief system, that you're going to automatically reject it, and it has no direct. That doesn't mean that you're not a good person. They don't believe you, but you're giving them information they don't want.
I've been a private investigator also for 31 years. They're facts, and they're just too many facts and too many things that are said. In a court of law, someone could be convicted of murder with all the evidence you have,
right,
so to speak, and all the evidence we have of so many different people, so many different walks of life, so many sightings. If it's not that, then I would say to someone, well, then what is it? Mm-hmm. Give me another explanation.
Sure.
All these people aren't hallucinating when they're out there.
Right.
So.
Yeah, we're fortunate enough we get a lot of military, retired and current military, and we get a lot of law enforcement in here that have told us about their sightings. And it's the same thing. I already know that they're not going to go, I don't get their address and their badge number. I know they have a reputation to protect. So we take the sightings, we take the story, and I don't blame them for not wanting to come forth. But when people ask that question, like you just said, how come they don't come forward and say that UFOs are real? Well, they haven't done enough research to realize that the reason that they're never going to disclose UFOs or Bigfoots is not because of the subject matter, but what's behind that subject matter, what is operating behind the scenes. So if the authorities admitted that these creatures were real or that UFOs were real, then we may take the next step and want to know what's behind it, and that's what's the secret. I had a nice guy. He gave me this great comparison. He says, when people keep asking, why didn't you get it on film? He said, it's like trying to film your own car accident. Is that when you see this thing unfolding in front of you, you're in sheer panic mode. You are not thinking about grabbing your phone to film it, to prove to everybody. You're not worried about if anybody believes you. You're just trying to live through the moment.
Yes.
And you're just overcome with fear, stress, and you can have a camera in your hand and still not take a picture of it. Yeah. Some of my best friends, Lori Wade, she organizes all the expeditions in the North Georgia area for the Bigfoot Field Research Organization.
Oh, okay.
So I know there's 2 in October up here, And that's just with the BFRO. There's other private expeditions that go on. I've been on many organized expeditions with the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, and I've been on way more private expeditions. Myself, my wife, and a couple of friends, or just me and my wife, will go out and put camera traps out along creek beds where I know there's crawfish and food. Sometimes we'll go out to the tops of mountains where people record screaming, and we'll hang recorders up there that'll hang for a month or two. They just turn on at certain times of the night and shut back off, battery backups. So, but the days of my expeditions are, I'll still go on a few.
Yeah.
But the stuff I'm looking for just walks in the door here. I know they're real. I know they cross roads. I know they hide behind trees. I've seen two in Alva, Florida. So my continued experience, or my continued expeditions, or just don't make a lot of sense to me, because you only get to a point where you're like a really good camper, because not a whole lot normally happens on expeditions. But when people can come in here and tell me that one crawled through their window, one was looking at them when they were a child, they saw one up on the roof of their house, it was stomping around, it banged on. So I get so much good information that it behooves me in my studies to be here to take information than it does to be out there banging on trees hoping that I hear or see something. A lot of people that trade or gift these creatures will gift things back to them. So what you have in this display case is what you might find left in place of your food. If you have
the creature will actually, if the people will leave food out, and then they will leave something
for them,
for a gift.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. That's why we know it's a sentient thinking being, is because once they like you and they take your food, they'll start leaving you things. Sometimes it's something you lost 2 years ago. Sometimes it's a shiny piece of metal that to them has some kind of value, and they'll give that to you. And of course, anytime people want to leave food for them, we always tell them to not leave them like an entire meal. You just want to leave them a treat. And it seems like sweet bread products are the treat they really enjoy. Cinnamon buns, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So anything sweet, basic bread is one of those things that they enjoy.
I may be a Bigfoot.
Yeah, right. That's one of my weaknesses. But it's something
butter.
they can get in the wild.
Well, David, thank you so much.
You're welcome, my friend.
I mean, I have thoroughly enjoyed it.
Oh, thanks.
And I wanted to meet the man behind it.